The moment the screen goes dark, nothing feels finished. The silence after the final scene of Fallout Season 2 Episode 2 is not calm, it's heavy, uncomfortable, and full of questions. Something has shifted in the world of the wasteland, and even though no explosion happens in the final seconds, the damage is already done. This episode doesn't end with chaos. It ends with truth. And that truth changes everything we thought we knew about survival, loyalty, and who can really be trusted. The final moments of episode 2 don't rely on action or violence to leave an impact. Instead, the power comes from what is revealed and what is withheld. The episode slows down, forcing the audience to sit inside the consequences of every choice made so far. The world of Fallout has always been brutal. But this ending proves that the most dangerous weapon isn't radiation or monsters, it's information. As the scene unfolds, we see the characters standing at a crossroads, both physically and emotionally. The environment feels tense, almost suffocating, as if the wasteland itself is watching. The camera lingers longer than usual, focusing on expressions rather than explosions. This is intentional. The show wants us to understand that something irreversible has just happened. A line has been crossed, and there is no way back. What makes this ending powerful is the realization that the truth has been hidden in plain sight. Small details from earlier episodes suddenly make sense, conversations that felt meaningless, glances that felt strange, and decisions that seemed out of character now reveal their purpose. The show quietly tells us that the characters were never truly free. They were always being guided, tested, and controlled. The final moments suggest that one character now knows more than they should. Their expression isn't shock, it's realization. The kind of realization that changes how you see everyone around you. This is not just about survival anymore. It's about understanding the system that created the wasteland and deciding whether to obey it or burn it down. What makes this ending so effective is its restraint. There's no dramatic speech, no explosion to distract the viewer. Instead, the silence forces us to sit with the truth. The world of Fallout has always been cruel, but episode 2 makes it clear that cruelty isn't random. It's designed. Someone is always watching, planning, and pulling strings behind the scenes. By ending the episode this way, the story shifts its focus from survival to awareness. The question is no longer will they survive, but what will they do now that they know the truth? This quiet realization becomes the real cliffhanger. The danger ahead isn't just outside in the wasteland, it's inside the system that created everything they thought they understood. This ending doesn't give answers. It gives consequences. And that is what makes it powerful. The second section of the episode shifts the focus from shock to understanding. And this is where the story becomes far more dangerous. After the quiet but heavy ending of the previous moments, the narrative slows down and allows the weight of what just happened to settle in. The characters are no longer reacting in panic. Instead, they begin processing what the truth actually means. This is where the episode becomes psychological rather than physical. The danger is no longer outside in the wasteland, it's inside the minds of the people who now realize they've been living inside a carefully designed lie. What makes this section powerful is how it shows the cost of awareness. Once a character starts to see through the system, there is no return to innocence. The episode uses silence, distance, and subtle facial expressions to show that realization spreading. No one says it out loud, but the fear is clear. If the truth is real, then everything they believed about safety, leadership, and survival collapses. The vault, once a symbol of protection, begins to feel like a cage. The outside world, once feared, suddenly feels more honest than the controlled lies within the walls. This part of the episode also deepens the emotional divide between characters. Some cling to the rules because rules are all they have ever known. Others start to question them, and that difference creates tension that words can't fix. Small arguments, short silences, and hesitant glances reveal that trust is breaking down. The show does an excellent job of showing how fear changes people not through big speeches, but through hesitation, body language, and the inability to look each other in the eye. What truly stands out in this section is how power quietly shifts hands. No explosions, no dramatic betrayals, just information. Knowledge becomes the most dangerous weapon in the room. The characters who understand the truth now have a choice: protect others from it or use it to survive. That choice is what defines who they are becoming. The episode suggests that the real threat is not the wasteland outside, but what people are willing to do once they realize the system was never built to save them. This part of the story also deepens the moral conflict of the series. It asks an uncomfortable question: is ignorance a form of safety, or is it just another kind of prison? The characters are forced to confront the cost of awareness. Some begin to pull away emotionally, while others grow more desperate to maintain control. Every quiet moment feels heavy because the audience knows something is about to break. By the end of this section, the tone has fully shifted. The show no longer feels like a story about survival alone. It becomes a story about choice, power, and consequence. The world hasn't ended yet, but the illusion holding it together is cracking fast. And once that crack turns into a break, there will be no going back. The third section of the episode pushes the story into a darker emotional space, where the consequences of truth begin to take shape through action rather than words. By this point, the characters are no longer reacting. They are adapting. The world around them feels heavier, slower, and more dangerous, as if the environment itself senses the shift that has taken place. What once felt structured now feels unstable, and every decision carries an invisible weight. This section focuses on how the knowledge gained earlier begins to change behavior, trust, and survival instincts in subtle but powerful ways. The most striking element here is how isolation becomes emotional rather than physical. Even when characters stand close to one another, there is distance in their eyes. Conversations become shorter, guarded, and careful. Every sentence feels calculated, as if saying the wrong thing could trigger consequences no one is ready to face. The show uses silence brilliantly, allowing long pauses to speak louder than dialogue. These quiet moments reveal fear, doubt, and internal conflict that words could never fully express. One of the strongest ideas explored in this section is the collapse of certainty. The systems and rules that once gave people comfort now feel hollow. Characters begin to question not just their leaders, but themselves. Were their choices truly their own, or were they shaped by manipulation they never saw coming? This inner conflict becomes more dangerous than any external threat. The realization that their lives may have been controlled from the start creates emotional fractures that can't be easily repaired. Trust becomes the most fragile currency in this part of the episode. Alliances that once felt solid begin to crack under pressure. Small gestures take on new meaning, and even kindness feels suspicious. The show makes it clear that survival is no longer about strength or preparation, but about perception. Those who can read the room, sense shifts in loyalty, and understand human weakness gain the upper hand. Those who cannot are left exposed. There is also a growing sense of inevitability woven through these scenes. The characters are beginning to understand that the path ahead may already be set in motion, and no single action can stop what's coming. This realization doesn't lead to panic, it leads to quiet resignation for some, and dangerous determination for others. The contrast between these reactions adds emotional depth and builds tension without relying on action or spectacle. As the section progresses, the environment itself mirrors this emotional decay. Spaces once associated with safety now feel cold and unwelcoming. Lighting becomes harsher, shadows deeper. Even familiar locations feel foreign, as if the world is slowly rejecting those who live within it. This visual shift reinforces the idea that the characters are losing control over their reality. By the end of this section, the story has firmly transitioned into a psychological battleground. The danger is no longer outside the walls. It lives in every choice, every glance, and every silence. What makes this moment so powerful is the understanding that no one can turn back. The truth has already changed them, and whether they accept it or fight it, the consequences are unavoidable. The path forward is no longer about survival alone, it's about who they are willing to become in order to endure what's coming next. The fourth section pushes the story into its most dangerous emotional territory yet, where the consequences of earlier choices begin to close in from every direction. At this point, the characters are no longer reacting to events, they are being tested by them. Every decision now carries weight, and even the smallest mistake feels capable of destroying what little stability remains. The atmosphere grows heavier, as if the world itself is pressing down on those who still believe they have control. This part of the story focuses deeply on internal conflict. Characters are no longer questioning the system from the outside. They are questioning themselves. Doubt creeps into every thought. Loyalties that once felt unbreakable start to feel fragile. People begin to realize that survival is not just about strength or intelligence, but about knowing when to act and when to stay silent. The line between right and wrong blurs, and moral clarity fades into uncertainty. What makes this section especially powerful is how it shows the emotional cost of knowledge. The truth that was uncovered earlier now becomes a burden. Carrying it changes how characters speak, move, and interact with others. Even moments of calm feel tense, as if something terrible could happen at any second. Trust, once broken, does not return easily, and every relationship begins to feel transactional. People start measuring each word, each look, each decision, afraid of revealing too much. The sense of control also begins to shift in unexpected ways. Characters who once appeared powerless start to gain influence simply because they understand what others do not. At the same time, those who believed they were in charge begin to lose their grip. Authority becomes fragile, and fear replaces confidence. The episode carefully shows how power does not always belong to the strongest or the loudest, but to those who understand the truth and know when to use it. This section also deepens the emotional weight by showing the cost of silence. Some characters choose to say nothing, hoping to protect themselves or others, but their silence becomes a form of betrayal. Others attempt to speak out but are met with resistance or disbelief. The result is a growing sense of isolation that spreads through the group like a slow poison. Everyone feels alone, even when surrounded by people. Visually and emotionally, the world feels colder here. Spaces that once felt familiar now feel empty and hostile. The lighting grows harsher, shadows linger longer, and the environment mirrors the internal collapse taking place. The show uses these details to quietly communicate that the world itself is reacting to the choices being made within it. By the end of this section, the story reaches a point where return is no longer possible. The characters have crossed an invisible line. Even if they wanted to go back to how things were, the truth has already reshaped them. What lies ahead is no longer about survival in the physical sense, but about confronting the cost of knowing too much. The question is no longer who will survive, but who will lose themselves in the process. The final section carries the weight of everything that came before it, turning quiet tension into something heavy and unavoidable. By this point, the characters are no longer reacting to events, they are living inside the consequences of their own awareness. The world around them has not changed physically, but emotionally it feels unrecognizable. What once felt structured and predictable now feels fragile, as if one wrong move could cause everything to collapse. The sense of inevitability grows stronger, and the story begins to close in on its most unsettling truth. At this stage, the characters understand that survival is no longer about escaping danger, but about choosing who they are willing to become. The moral lines that once guided them have faded, replaced by difficult compromises and quiet calculations. Every decision now carries weight, not because of immediate danger, but because of what it says about who they are willing to be in order to endure. The episode makes it clear that the greatest cost of survival is not physical pain, but the slow erosion of identity. The tension reaches its peak through restraint rather than action. Conversations are careful, guarded, and filled with unspoken meaning. A single glance can communicate fear, guilt, or resolve. Characters who once trusted each other completely now speak as if every word could be used against them. The fear of being exposed becomes stronger than the fear of death itself. In this world, knowing too much is as dangerous as knowing nothing at all. One of the most powerful elements in this section is how the story reframes control. The illusion of power that once belonged to certain figures begins to crack. Authority no longer comes from position or strength, but from information. Those who understand the truth, even partially, gain influence simply by holding it. This shift quietly rearranges the balance of power, creating new threats where none seemed to exist before. The episode makes it clear that control is no longer centralized. It is scattered, unstable, and dangerous in the wrong hands. Emotionally, the characters are pushed to their limits. Some begin to accept the reality they once feared, while others fight against it, desperate to hold on to the version of the world they believed in. There is grief here, not just for what has been lost, but for what was never real to begin with. That realization hurts more than any physical wound. It forces the characters to confront the truth that their past choices were shaped by lies they never questioned. As the section reaches its end, the story settles into a heavy stillness. There is no explosive climax, no dramatic victory or defeat. Instead, there is acceptance, not of peace, but of change. The characters now understand that the path ahead will demand sacrifices they may not be ready to make. The future is uncertain, dangerous, and deeply personal. This ending does not offer comfort. It offers clarity. The world of Fallout is no longer just a place to survive. It is a test of identity, morality, and resolve. What matters now is not who they were, but who they choose to become in a world that no longer hides its true nature.